We have press releases down at the end. We have a list of the addresses of the farms down at the end as well, along with a link to all the original unedited files. And It's a Trap has provided vegan treats for everybody today, so help yourselves. We're going to show a 12-minute video. Then Dr. Alice Roth is going to give a presentation on what the video contains. And then we will open it up to a Q&A, and then we will have some TDs making some statements as well. So I'm going to hand you over to Dr. Alice Roth so she can introduce what she's going to do.
Hello. So I'm a pig veterinarian. I worked in the British pig industry for 4 years, where I was overseeing sort of hundreds of varied pig farms, carrying out routine health and welfare inspections, assurance scheme inspections, firefighting disease, cannibalism outbreaks, that sort of thing. Prior to my veterinary training, I also worked on an intensive breed-to-finish unit, mostly in the farrowing house, where around 300 mothers were confined to crates.
Let me pass it on to Becky.
Sorry.
Hi, my name is Becky Jenkins, and thank you all for being here today. I am very grateful. I'm with Animal Rebellion Ireland. We are a grassroots volunteer organisation. Our work is focused on pushing for just transition to a sustainable plant-based food system. So, put that in layman's terms, we care about the animals, we care about environment, we care about people. The video that you're going to see in a moment is not easy to watch, but it's only about 10 minutes. And if we can endure, I think we can endure 10 minutes of this if these animals can endure their whole lives in these conditions. I know that there's a lot going on in the world right now. There's a lot going on with Patrick's Day. We've got our TDs off in whatever state doing whatever. But luckily, justice and compassion are not finite resources, and we can extend them to all living beings as well as many humans. I think factory farming is one of the most neglected issues in our country and in the world. Our children and grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, will learn about factory farming probably in their history classes, I hope. And they will come home and they will ask us, did we know and what did we do? And so as citizens and as consumers, we are all complicit in what we're about to see. But the flip side of that is that we all have the power to make changes and to speak up to address what we're going to see. So our goal today is to raise awareness and to shed some light on what is in Ireland a very dark and secretive industry. So with that, unless there's anything else you'd like to add at this point, we will start the video, and then Dr. Alice will give a brief talk, and we will open for Q&A with Dr. Alice, Laura, and myself. Thank you all so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Viewer discretion is advised. In March 2024, we released our first investigation into the horrific reality of Ireland's pig industry. What happened next?
You asked what life is.
What happened next?
You asked what life is really like for pigs in Ireland. It is truly the most awful life you can imagine.
No agriculture has to come to an end.
The pig industry is an abomination. No one could look at those pigs in those stalls, crates or pens and convince themselves that they are content or well cared for.
What's going to happen about it is, will the state have at least an investigation into conditions in the pig industry?
We need to give farmers ways and means to transition out of pig farming. It is not a good industry. It should be shut down, in my opinion. How often are pig farms inspected? How many fines have they been given for mistreatment or for animal welfare? This really needs to be acted upon. It's time for this cruelty to end, and for sow stalls in particular to be banned in Ireland.
Deputy Paul Murphy recently submitted a parliamentary question to ask the Minister for Agriculture about the results of the department's investigation following the submission of the pig farm footage. This was their response. In March 2024, my department received material relating to alleged breaches of animal welfare requirements on 2 Irish pig farms. I can confirm that the material was reviewed by my officials and a follow-up investigation was commenced. Enforcement actions as considered necessary and appropriate were taken. The matter is still subject to ongoing review and investigation. I can also confirm to the Deputy that pig farms in Ireland are subject to risk-based animal welfare inspections as part of official controls carried out under specific pig welfare legislation. My department is fully committed to promoting and maintaining high animal welfare standards and to continued enforcement of the Animal Health and Welfare Act 2013 and other relevant animal welfare legislation. A few months later, we continued our efforts to expose the truth, and this is what we found. Location: Cavan. Farms visited: 4. In 2023, there were approximately 93 pig farms in the county of Cavan. Approximately 96.8% of pigs in Ireland are kept on large-scale factory farms. Like our previous investigation, we picked the farms at random with no prior tip-offs or knowledge of the conditions contained within. We have now visited 6 farms in total, all with the same conditions found. Farm 1. This is what the outside of hell looks like. Just like our first investigation, you are about to witness both legal and illegal animal cruelty. What is legal? Sow stalls, farrowing crates, barren fattening pens, tail docking when farmers deem it necessary, no outdoor space, no bedding, no natural light. What's illegal? Filthy conditions, no food, no water, no enrichment, no veterinary treatment. Filthy, disgusting farrowing crates, no space to move, and every piglet had their tail docked without anaesthetic. This piglet was unable to stand or get away from their siblings pushing them around. Unusual, stereotypical behaviour was displayed by this poor sow who was lying down, obsessively licking the floor of her crate the entire time we were there. Stereotypical behaviour is repetitive behaviour with no goal or function resulting from extreme stress. These behaviours are rarely seen in animals in the wild and are most commonly found in animals kept in captivity. As you can see here, she has nothing in her trough. Other stalls were filthy with feces. This piglet was unable to stand or walk properly and had a very visible injured front right foot. Bar biting, common in distressed pigs, is witnessed here. This room is their daily life, with no escape from suffering every second of the day. Note that in this shed, even though it was night time, the lights were kept on permanently. We found more horrors in the wiener of fattening hen. Total darkness, filthy, rancid conditions, and visible injuries and health issues such as hernias. Ill and injured pigs were held here in the sick pen. One sow had a severely torn, infected vulva which was visibly bleeding. We could only imagine the extreme pain she must have been in. The other had what appeared to be a severe neurological issue. Note there is zero bedding and nothing to provide comfort for these dying sows. They're not even shown the mercy of euthanasia. They are just a number and a commodity to make money. These are sow stalls. Before we even entered the shed, we could hear frantic vocalizing from the sows, a sign of extreme distress. Desperate to escape, this will be her life until she is killed. Farm 2. More filthy conditions were found in this farm. These are the fattening pens, hugely infested with flies. This piglet was suffering from ear necrosis. A probable cause for this could be biting, which is a common symptom of extreme stress due to confinement. It could also be due to an infection. The fattening pens were loud and had no bedding or any enrichment. Here you can see more injured ears affected by necrosis. We found this dead pig outside the buildings. Note the missing eye, indicating that the body had been left there for at least several hours. This is a huge biosecurity violation, which is a risk to both human and animal health. Farm 3. There were truly revolting sheds at this farm. Look at the cobwebs and the state of the ceiling. Those bars hanging by chains are supposed to be their entertainment, known in the industry as enrichment. The next shed of sow stalls were no different. Can you imagine this being your life? Rub wounds were prevalent along with flies. This was just sitting out there in the open, not stored properly. It's a bottle of Abraport which is used to control aggression or stress in sows. The next day, we observed these pigs left in a transport truck, unattended and very agitated. Farm 4. This farm, a breeding facility, was newer and much bigger than the previous 3 we visited. It had thousands of pigs on site, confined, no bedding, no enrichment, and a sow who was visibly lame and in pain. The site was fly infested and scratch marks were visible on many pigs throughout the sheds we visited. Artificial lights were on even though it was the middle of the night. No animal deserves a life like this. We found enrichment in these 2 pens, planks of wood and metal chains. How was this supposed to stimulate or entertain them? This sow was very thin and covered in flies. Bar biting was common here too. In the farrowing sheds, the sows had no room to move. The piglets' tails were docked, fecal matter was visibly dried in on the bars and walls, and there were more flies. We saw this dying piglet clearly in need of urgent veterinary attention. These piglets were covered in feces. And as you can see, the 2 on the right were clearly sick. The others on the left have visibly bloodied docked tails. More bloody docked tails were visible in this pen, as well as a clearly psychologically broken sow. Like the previous farms, we found sows with rub wounds here too. Dead piglets were observed here who had clearly been left there for some time. Their mother forced to look at their lifeless body from her cage. Look at her. Is a bacon sandwich worth doing this? We found charts like this which list possible reasons for deaths on the farms, all acceptable in the pig industry. Upon leaving, we made this grim discovery: a bin full of dead pigs, a common find on farms and a result of injuries and illnesses. For pigs, death is their only escape from the sadistic conditions they are forced to endure from the second they are born. Could you do this to an animal? Could you walk into these sheds day after day and think it's okay? If you did this to a dog or a cat, you would be prosecuted. People with no empathy are a danger to animals and to people. And we're not just talking about the farms. The Department of Agriculture, inspectors, vets and suppliers all see and know what happens, yet do nothing. These pigs can't even turn around. Their options are standing still or lying down. No outdoor space, no bedding, no enrichment, no clean space, no sunlight, no life. If you eat pig products, this is what you're paying for. If you eat pig products, this is happening because of you too, not just the farmers or the authorities. By boycotting these products, you can help stop 3.5 million pigs being abused and killed here every year. Ireland's pig industry is a depraved example of what humans are capable of when there are no consequences to their actions. Well, their days are numbered. This is the final countdown, and we are going to dedicate our time to eradicating this abomination from the country. So, what now? Deputy Paul Murphy will be introducing a bill to ban the majority of the cruelest aspects of pig farming, and we are working with other politicians to put forward proposals to help farmers transition out of animal agriculture. These legislative changes, if approved, would be a great step towards shutting down this barbaric industry. But what we really need is a full and immediate ban on pig farming in Ireland, not just welfare improvements or a slow transition for farmers, because much like fur farming, there is no way in which this industry could ever be legislated into being acceptable. Animals are not ours to use, abuse, kill or eat. Another way is possible, and you have the power to make kinder choices every time you go to the supermarket. Are you ready to join in our efforts to ban pig farming in Ireland? There are 3 ways you can help. Go vegan today. We can help you with this. Tell your friends and family, share on social media, and lobby your local politicians. Get active in our campaign to shut down animal abusers, one farm at a time. You can write letters, join protests, hand out leaflets. It all helps. Contact us today.
Okay, that was the video. Really horrible stuff, but this is the reality of pig farming in Ireland, and this is why we do dedicate our time to this campaign at the moment, and it's why we are calling for a ban on pig farming. The farms, again, we picked them at random. We weren't given tip-offs, and even though the particular farms shown in the footage were filthy and disgusting, make them clean, and they're still in those sow stalls, they're still in those crates, they're still in those pens, they're still not seeing sunlight, there's still no blade of grass. Make it clean, and it's just as horrific. So what I'm going to do is pass you over to Dr. Ellis now, and she's going to give a presentation, and afterwards then we'll be taking a few questions from the audience, or if anyone would like to make a statement.
I'll just set up 1 second. Okay. Where's that gone? Back again. That's exciting. Hope that doesn't happen very well. So, do go back and watch last year's press conference, by the way, because I'm going to try and cover some different topics this year a little bit. But just to say to start, I've seen all of this firsthand, repeatedly over a period of years. The only difference in my experience is that we don't have sow stalls in the UK, though I have reviewed a lot of footage of sows in stalls, sadly. But these are not isolated incidents by any means. They represent issues you'd very much expect to find on farms that look like this. So I've picked some images out of the videos you've already seen, just so I can talk over them. There's absolutely loads I could have covered. But it's almost stating the obvious. This kind of speaks for itself. So, beyond the obvious, the feces Ooh, that microphone just kicked in. Don't know why that wasn't working before. hope you've heard everything I've said so far. So beyond the obvious, the feces-covered pigs, surfaces, flies, lack of enrichment and comfort. This looks like pretty typical stocking density, so these pigs have got a little bit of growing left to go. But they've also got extremely short tail docks, so docking the tails right down to the base of the spine like that suggests to me that this unit is expecting problems with tail biting or basing that decision on previous disasters with tail biting. In the wider shots of these pens, you can see lots of pigs with wounds on their bodies from fighting due to being crammed into these inappropriate groupings, and some emaciated pigs who likely won't reach slaughter. So closer in on these growers, I'm going to play this video and I want you to listen to it and see if you can hear like the background coughing. I don't know if it's going to come through. That didn't come through the speakers, but there is background coughing. In another shot of the shed, you can see pigs with sore back ends and diarrhea. In other words, these are not healthy pigs, despite these being quite new-looking facilities, expensive facilities, that you'd expect to be cleaned between batches. They are diseased pigs. This greater control over herd health is often cited as a reason for industrialisation of farming. But as we're seeing with avian influenza in the UK and the US particularly, and as we saw with African swine fever in China, where 200 million pigs died in the space of 2 years, that is not a valid reason. Cramped, stressed, filthy animals tend to be more vulnerable to disease, as you'd expect, as well as the rapid progression and spread of disease. Conversely, pigs raised in natural environments have the chance to develop robust immune systems, like with healthy gut development, strong musculoskeletal systems, generally lower stress levels. Even if it were a valid argument, would you rather be caged and disease-free or risk exposure to a few bugs roaming free? So the disease is a risk factor for this vice behaviour, sort of coping mechanism in response to stress. Vice behaviours like tail, vulval flank and ear biting. So the video correctly mentions ear necrosis. It's throughout this whole shed, not just this pen. It can be due to infection, biting, injury, and exacerbated by certain environmental conditions. But I suspect because the tails have been removed, made unavailable, because they're sick, because they live in these conditions, it's likely due to biting. Conversely, if you look at the ears of wild boar, they're like really small and tucked away. But we've bred pigs for compliance, so giving them these big flapping ears to cover their eyes so that we can control them and we can sneak up on them, which makes them more vulnerable for biting and also might contribute to fighting because they can't read facial expressions or see any warning from the periphery. We've also taken their tails, which they would usually use for communication as well. Juggling my hands. So it looks like these pigs have already been thinned out, for slaughter started being thinned out. But I just left this in because if you can attach, if the ceiling is strong enough to attach a chain with enrichment, it's certainly strong enough to be cleaned. There's really no excuse for leaving sheds like this. And you might be interested to hear that salmonella, zoonotic strains of salmonella can live in dust for over 4 years. See if I can get this to play. So the young females who don't go to slaughter from the sheds we've just seen may find themselves in here to be inseminated and live there for the next month of their pregnancy. Take note at the end of this video, once it works its way through, you'll see the enrichment that's provided to them just on the corner here. Some black plastic with a chain. We're logging these for discussion in a moment. Oops, sorry. So I don't know if you noticed in the longer footage, as the camera panned, there was a stall with a feed trough that was full of sort of dripped blood down the front. In the absence of their natural behaviours like foraging, rooting, nesting, roaming, exploring, social interactions, normal surroundings. Pigs in crates develop stereotypies and pathological coping mechanisms, so they can bar bite, paw at the ground, obsessively lick at the floor. I think we saw that in the video as well. They can flood their pens with their drinkers and destroy their feeders, which I think is probably what's happened here. They've been chewing that rusty metal to the point where their mouths bleed. I want you to listen to this one as well. So these sounds are extremely agitated. You can hear it in their voice, you can see it clearly in their behaviour. Pigs actually use over 20 different vocalisations, and they can change the tone and the pitch to communicate really effectively. They're so communicative, and they have many ways in which they communicate, but their vocalisations seem to be a really obvious way that they do that. They have food available here, so it's not a cry for feed. This looks just like a desperate attempt to get out. Pigs can recognise people by their facial features, and they can remember events from their past. So I wonder if they've recognised that these are not the same people that trapped them in there and took away their last litter of babies. Perhaps they're asking for help. Oh, sorry. Every time I press next, it plays again. Okay. So this is the respite that exhausted mothers are afforded when they come out of their crates. Again, barren, comfortless pens, and because they're kind of constantly moving through this cycle of extreme confinement through to being forced into these unusual groupings in barren pens, losing their babies prematurely that they're not expecting, they can kind of end in these tussles to re-establish hierarchies and relieve tension, which is what these body marks are on her. In the video we saw that very poorly stored bottle of Azaport, and that's actually a sedative, so they use that to kind of quell the stress of extreme confinement, usually when you're putting a gilt in for their first time in a cage, or to deal with situations like this. Also, just really enjoyed the way that these two are sleeping on the top right, with the nose between the legs there. Pigs are really social animals. They display emotional contagion. So what that means basically, if one pig experiences a negative stimulus, then the others will provide social support through physical contact, nose to nose, body to body. It's kind of the basis for empathy, even if they haven't experienced that stimulus themselves. Then they're put right back into a cage. Probably don't need more sound on that. And this is the result. She has wounds all over her face and down the back of her neck, which I suspect is where she's tried to push through those bars at the front. I'm really unsure why they've put their troughs together like that. It's a really unusual thing to do if you understand pig behaviour. So pigs in their natural surroundings would leave their herd to go and find like an isolated nest site to farrow away from everyone else. So it's probably incredibly stressful being put there face to face. They might not get on, they're individuals like us after all. Those two might just not like each other. You can hear piglets squealing. There will be hundreds of piglets in one shed, which adds to the level of distress that these mothers experience. And this orange plastic bit is her enrichment, if you can take that seriously. So this is not the face of a calm, happy pig, in my opinion. Firstly, she looks incredibly uncomfortable the way she's lying, but I think she looks anxious. Probably all of her experiences with human beings have been negative, and she knows that she can't move to protect her piglets if she needed to. This piglet here is emaciated, so you can see their spine, shoulders, hip bones protruding. I mentioned last time that around 14,000 pigs are dying each week on Irish pig farms. That's just the rearing herd, and predominantly the majority of those mortalities happen in this pre-weaning period. So within crates, stillbirths, deaths in fetal membranes, so suffocation because the mother can't turn around to deal with her birthing piglets, accidental crushing on a hard floor, starvation, disease, these all appear to be more prevalent causes of piglet death in crates than free range. So the resulting pre-weaning mortality rate, I'm going to use the UK as an example because you guys don't have much outdoor production. The mortality rate is lower in the outdoor herd than the indoor. Likewise, breeding sow mortality in the UK outdoor herd is much lower than indoor, and is a whole 2% lower than Ireland's sow mortality rate, which is at 8.4%, which is pretty high. Sorry. Oops. Contrary to popular belief, pigs are actually very hygienic. She's being forced to defecate, where she's now going to have to lie down her sensitive udder to nurse her piglets. Sorry. There are a couple of shots in the longer videos of sows with kind of ulcers on their udders, like open sores. Because you've got hard, unhygienic flooring, the sow is having to lie down more often than she would normally. The presence of flies, the fact that she can't actually escape her piglets, who would normally be running around rooting, possibly trying to nurse more, she's having to lie down onto that disgusting surface, so mastitis is much more common in crates. So we have some sickly pigs covered in diarrhea, losing condition. Last year I told you that a sow had given birth to a record 41 piglets in Brazil. That's been surpassed over the last year. There's now a litter of 45 piglets birthed by a sow of the most commonly used genetic line worldwide. So welfare scientists recommend aiming for no more than 12 to 14 piglets born alive. Ireland's current average is nearly 15, which is higher than the UK. It's quite possible here that infection has been introduced through these diabolical tail dogs. It really shouldn't look like that. I have been sent a video recently of a farmer clipping the teeth of piglets and then using the same clippers to dock the tails without washing in between, despite the fact it would have been taught otherwise. And this square to the right, this kind of yellowy bit, is effectively their nest. That might be heated, but that is the extent of the comfort they are afforded. So we get a view of the full extent of her enrichment here. She's got a bit of wood on a chain and an orange plastic piece attached to that bar. That's a dead piglet lying in front of her. She went on to exhibit stereotypies like bar biting and licking the floor. But these pigs see no natural light. Sometimes the artificial lights are left on overnight, as these guys found. That's effectively psychological torture, disrupting their sleep like that, and affecting their diurnal rhythms. A phenomenon observed predominantly in crated first-time mothers is the savaging of their own young shortly after birth. So savaging is killing and sometimes cannibalising piglets. The risk factors for this behaviour are abundant in farrowing crates, so confinement, poor conditions, no nesting material, noise, difficulties farrowing, etc. And it's truly horrific to find. None of the sows in these 4 farms are given a single shred of nesting material. In nature, pigs will spend almost all their waking hours foraging, rooting for food, and then when it comes to farrowing time, they'll spend all their time preparing a nest. They've got nothing, and we can't explain to them why they're in here and that it's temporary. This is their entire reality, just that metal feeder and piece of plastic. Studies have shown that pigs will go to great lengths to avoid boredom. They'll complete tasks and work out problems even when there's no reward, simply to be doing something. They can navigate and remember mazes at just a few days old. They can use tools, mirrors, paint pictures, play video games. They are incredibly smart animals. The wording on enrichment in EU legislation is actually pretty clear already. Pigs must have permanent access to sufficient quantity of materials like straw, hay, sawdust. Things like chains, hard plastic and wood is insufficient. So why is every farm failing and allowed to fail on this seemingly simple provision? So I see this very sadly in every investigation I review. For the last 5 years I've been reviewing footage like this. We saw it last year. I saw it frequently as a vet at my pre-arranged visits. Pigs left to die in agony. And the girl at the back is basically skeletal. You can see her spine. She's infected, as these guys pointed out. She may have prolapsed previously, and she's wasting away in a pool of her own blood and waste. This hasn't happened overnight. There is really no reason for her to be alive and suffering through this. Every farm should have the means to alleviate the suffering, and yet many don't. The girl at the front can barely keep her head upright due to a neurological issue. They haven't given them bedding, they haven't tended to her wounds. Access to food and water will be difficult given their condition, but even if they could reach it, when the camera pans left, you see that the food in the trough is rotting. This is supposed to be a hospital pen. I'll end on this one. So she's dying. She needed help weeks ago. Her piglets, as you can see on the right, are actually okay. The aim for this farm will be to get them to weaning weight and then shoot her as a waste product. Or, like the previous two, just leave her in a pen to die. These prolonged periods in cages on hard floors cause irreversible damage to their bodies, very well recognised, for affecting cardiac function, bone strength, muscle tone. Nerve damage can leave them getting up at the end of a farrowing period and unable to walk. Pressure sores, like we saw in the footage, develop commonly and heal very poorly. And I mentioned mastitis, but we also see more prolapses and difficulties farrowing. I'm putting it together now. So at the very start of the animal welfare in the Department for Agriculture document, it states animals are entitled to the 5 freedoms. Those freedoms are freedom from hunger, thirst and malnutrition, from discomfort, from pain, injury and disease, from fear and distress, and freedom to express normal behaviour. It's also now widely accepted in welfare science that to provide good welfare is not only to remove the negative experiences, but to provide opportunity for positive ones. We never provide factory farms an opportunity for joy or positive experience. They have no play, no comfort, no stimulation or expression of normal behaviour. Those 5 freedoms are the most basic welfare needs, and yet none of them appear to be met here. So how does this keep happening? The department also alluded to their risk-based welfare inspections. This means that a farm already has to have been flagged at one of their routine pre-arranged inspections, or exposed, to receive an unannounced visit where the farmer doesn't have time to prepare and put enrichment in, etc. I also looked up your board beer inspection protocols. They suggest 1 to 1.5 hours to go around all the buildings, storage, feed mills, speak to all the staff, etc. And some of these farms have, I don't know whether you said like 12,000 pigs. That would be inspecting 200 pigs a minute without looking at anything else. So it's no wonder they're not picking up welfare issues. Before the department says in their response that they are committed to promoting and maintaining high welfare standards, they state that appropriate action was taken. Now I'd say as a matter of public interest, we ought to know what happens to these farms. They are taking public money for a public good, even if some of us don't want it. But yeah, they're allowed to hide the entire process from the public. The reality, I think, is that their oversight and enforcement, if 97% of farms look like this in Ireland, what can they actually do? In 2021, the Irish Veterinary Journal published a study on farmer attitudes. This one was around antimicrobial use. So they considered themselves as operating responsibly because it was what has always been done and was therefore considered reliable and safe. Farmers appeared more likely to rely on previous experience or wait for an imposed change, e.g. legislation, instead of taking personal action. Similarly, a recent study of survey of members of the UK's National Pig Association regarding farrowing crates very clearly states that farmers will only change through enforced legislation. Just last week I was writing a report on farrowing crates, not yet published, but I'll send it around when it is. And I found a study dating back to 1991 that identified that provision of nesting material reduces piglet mortality. 34 years to act on a very simple suggestion for improved welfare and productivity for the farmer. All this to say we cannot wait for them to do the right thing in terms of animal welfare, environment and even human health. Just this week, the UK's Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation published a report on how detrimental factory farming is to food security as a nation, contrary to what we're told by the industry. So with that, this bill must coincide with a ban on imports of lower standards and supporting farmers to transition to more sustainable farming practices. Ideally, absolutely nothing to do with pigs. All your farmers will be undercut, your own farmers will be left in the dirt, and your welfare issues will be exported, as we've so excellently demonstrated in Britain. So to make that smoother, consumers must be given this information. They must be given the opportunity to understand what it is that they're unwittingly paying for. So we have a responsibility to share this. And finally, please support this bill. Cages and mutilations are two of many, but two of the main, most fundamentally hideous pillars holding up this abhorrent system. It's a very important start and the absolute least we can do for these pigs. Support the dedicated people putting it forward and the courageous people putting themselves in danger sometimes to gather this irrefutable evidence. I'm not sure anyone can appreciate how hard it is until they've been there, how hard it is to go into these places and then walk away at the end and leave them there. So I thank everyone for that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice, for that. That was an incredible presentation. Paul Murphy, Ruth Coppinger, could we get some statements from you both?
Yeah, very quickly. I mean, first thing to say is really thanks so much for you all for, you know, putting yourself through that, of exposing what goes on, which, you know, means that the world can see it, that we can see it, when supposedly we have inspections, like you're saying, and everything is fine. I mean, what was really striking to me is how these are randomly selected farms. So you've now hit 6 farms, and all have horrific conditions in terms of animal welfare, horrendous cruelty, which means just the usual argument of the department and the government is, when they're kind of caught on these things, is like, oh, it's one bad apple, but don't worry, the industry's fine, and we're going to deal with it, and they just kind of kick it away. And like, when you have 6 farms, no good examples, you know, it's very hard for them to maintain that, I think, that like, clearly, it's not just one rotten apple, the whole barrel of factory farming is rotten inherently, you know, because of the drive for profit, and that's the base of which it's done, and then the animals are the first to suffer. So just to mention that we have been working, Diana, in my office with Dr. Alice and Laura have been working on legislation to effectively outlaw the very worst aspects of this cruelty. So effectively outlawing what the bill would do, and which is signed by Ruth and will be signed by Richard Barrett as well. What the bill will do is effectively outlaw all forms of mutilation of pigs. So tail docking, teeth clipping and castration would be outlawed, and then effectively ban the use of sow stalls and farrowing crates. So the very, very worst aspects, obviously we acknowledge there's still lots of bad things that would be left, but the reality would be, in terms of if it was actually implemented, it would be a fundamental challenge to the current model of factory farming in terms of the amount of space that will be required for pigs and so on. They just couldn't continue on the current basis. And it's done with a view to then having the opportunity to speak out about these things in the Dáil. So it's been submitted to the Bills Office now, and we'll get a chance to introduce it at first stage, hopefully certainly before the summertime, as soon as possible. There's just a bit of a process. We'll get a chance to speak about it then in the Dáil, to speak about some of this evidence, also the evidence from last year, and to outline the rationale for it. But also more immediately, I'm sure both myself and Ruth and others will try and raise it. The Dáil's not on this week, but the Dáil's back next week, and so we'll definitely try and raise it then. But the main thing is really fair play to you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, so thank you so much to the activists and to Alice and everybody who's been involved in this. I'll just say something very briefly. It was actually in this room when we were having a press conference on the banning of fur farming a few years back, that a vet actually said to me, you have to turn your attention now to pigs. And this was a vet who had visited farms, I'm sure like Alice, in the course of their job, and was just disgusted by what they saw. So obviously I think it would be very good to get vets on side like we did with the ban on fur farming, because that was actually the death knell of fur farming in reality, because it was very difficult for TDs to argue with vets. But I think the intelligence of pigs just was really brought out there. I think we need to really bring that out. So maligned actually in popular culture and discourse. I think Ireland's agri-food sector is, touted so much with the lovely shamrock on it, and this impression that everything is produced in a wholesome way. And if you actually walk around, it's impossible to avoid ham in anything, be it like in any restaurant or sandwich or whatever. So it is a huge part of people's culture, and we have to change and educate people as to what is actually going on, because ultimately the people in the Dáil we know are tied in completely with the factory farming ethos and industry. So I think it's about popular opinion pressuring TDs yet again. We know they allow animals to be used for entertainment and abused. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the impact of this on social media. We'll do anything that we can to share and to promote it. And then in the run up to the bill, hopefully we can bring more attention onto it as well. So thanks so much.
Thank you both so much, and I know we're all very much looking forward to this bill being introduced and doing what we can to help even partly make it a success. But I have to say, in the last year we have distributed about 10,000 leaflets on this campaign all around the country, and surprisingly we are getting less opposition to that than we did for our campaign against fur farming. People didn't have much love for the pearl mink, but when we were challenging people about stopping eating pig products, they're looking at the photos, they're looking at the leaflets, and we're not getting the debates and arguments we did over fur. So I think that the people of Ireland are ready. It's the politicians in charge that are holding everything back as per usual. But Paul and Ruth are a light in the dark to help bring us forward. So thank you both so much. Then I'd just like to pass over to Councillor John Lyons.
Okay. Thanks, Laura. And look, I'm struck by it. We were here this time last year, and I think I looked around the room and people's reactions, and I was actually looking away. At times I was going to start looking at my phone. The level of cruelty and suffering, inflicted there. So firstly, to thank the people who carried out that investigation. But secondly, to my mind, the reaction from last year's investigation. So the Irish Farmers Association came out and just defended the whole industry, didn't even want to engage on the issue. It says to me that, what does that say? But more importantly, the Department of Agriculture, you're right, Alice, absolutely. If this was an outlier, if the previous investigation, those farms were the rotten apples in the barrel, then they should have been out front and centre to shame them. To say that no, the industry is highly regulated, they're all looked after very well, all the usual stuff. But they didn't. They've been hiding it, and they're coming out with PQ responses to Paul, which basically there's no transparency whatsoever. Which says to me that the 200%, like, what do you have to do? Does NAR and Animal Rebellion have to go to every single farm in every single county to show just how rife that this level of cruelty and suffering is? And to my mind, it seems as if it's like everything, it's a known unknown. It's like we knew about the tax scandals back in the day, we knew about the abuse of children by the church, we know about the abuse of animals by farmers right across the country, but they don't want to do anything about it. Politically, they think that the agricultural sector is too important. It's not. It's not that important. It's not, anyway. So I think, look, after the investigation last year, we did have a showing of the investigation in City Hall. There is apparently going to be set up in Dublin City Council a new animal welfare group, so I think we could use that as a way through, just to get the information out there. Because to my mind, I'm just thinking of those pigs here now, right now. The level of suffering, it's horrific, and you look at their eyes, and you can see the pain and conditions. So it's just not acceptable, and for any human being in the Dáil or in any of the state bodies that have any role to play in this, for them not to be spurred into action by that level of suffering, it says so much about them as individuals. It really does. It's shameful. So we have to shame them. It's the only way you seem to get anything done in this country is to shame politicians into action. So just 100% support, and we'll do whatever we can in Dublin City Council to support you. Okay.
Thank you so much for that, John Lyons, and we look forward to working with you on future motions in Dublin City Council as well. We're going to open this up now to a Q&A. It's probably going to be Alice answering most of the questions, but if it's campaign related, you can ask myself or Becky, otherwise it will be Alice. So is there any questions anyone would like to ask?
I have a question. I'm just wondering, it's actually for you, Laura. Have you approached the likes of RTE and stuff to try and get them involved in this, and what is their response to that?
Well, they were invited to be here today. Now, they did turn up last time for our investigation, so it's unfortunate they didn't this time. But we will be sending out the press release again to everyone with the URL to the original unedited files, videos, and the addresses of the farms as well. And this time, we would be looking for a more detailed response from the IFA. I think in particular, there was a rep that had debated with Becky the last time and basically denied everything that she had said. So we would very much like them to have a thorough look, especially at Farm 1, and see what they say this time. And I just hope that this investigation gets the recognition it deserves, and I hope it is an instrument for change, because honestly the public are ready. We get a lot of support everywhere we go with these leaflet drops. Everyone's ready, and it's just the government that needs to change.
Fairly equivalent to a lot of nations across the EU. There are some that are certainly worse, I think, that are trailing behind on certain aspects. But I mean, looking at it and seeing the percentage of factory farmed pigs here and the fact that you still have sow stalls, I mean, that's so archaic. We banned them in 1999 in the UK. Kind of expecting that farrowing crates would be a natural follow-on from that, but sadly it hasn't been. Yeah, I think fairly equivalent. And I think unofficially there are Danish pig vets coming over and consulting on Irish pig farms now, and Denmark is classically very intensive for pig farming, very, very high production pigs. So I'm concerned that there is that kind of EU influence of intensify and grow and just stop, like you're already kind of at the limit of what you can do here. In terms of your space and land, this is coming off topic a little bit, but I think you're down to like 1% native forest cover here. Like there isn't physically enough land to intensify and increase the pollution from these sorts of industries as well. Like it's a huge mistake to be going sort of in that direction. Lost my train of thought. Anyone else?
Just
5 minutes until I come.
Just to follow up on what Kelly was saying about transitioning, like from looking at the footage, I don't know how anyone could do that day after day after day after day, much like the same with fur farms. But with fur farming, when they were shut down, the farmers were compensated, and they have gotten into other business avenues, I'm sure. So we can provide the same sort of transition, but I also like to mention that when we talk about a just transition, just for whom? You know, I mean, if the government wanted to, they could provide all these farmers with funding into something alternative, but it can't be over a lengthy phase-out time. I mean, every second that those pigs are there is a second too long. And, you know, I've been vegan since I was 14, and I'm nearly 36 now. And for me, being part of these investigations, I feel forever changed and scarred for life from just being in there and seeing it, as Alice and Becky will know as well. So I have to reiterate that we want to keep the animals centred in the fight, but absolutely we don't want anyone, you know, out of pocket or homeless. We want everyone to be able to live their lives and transition out of animal agriculture, but there needs to be a rapid pace on this, because you all saw the footage. That's happening right now, and a lot of the pigs that we witnessed are already dead, and there's new ones in their place, and we can't let this cycle keep continuing. And I just want to say thanks to Cara. She was the voiceover for our video, and she had to watch all this footage raw and go over it. So it was a very traumatic experience for her too. And Chloe McKeown, our video editor, she had to go through hours and hours and hours of footage, slicing everything together. Absolutely horrific. Both of them doing it on a voluntary basis. Alice is here as a voluntary basis. We're not being charged a fee for her time. And without Alice, we wouldn't have the weight of our campaign. Alice has been in touch with Paul Murphy's office on this bill. I mean, this is a huge collaborative effort, and even though I'm the public face of NARA and Beck would be the public face of Animal Rebellion, there is a huge team involved in this, and a huge team that will have to remain anonymous for security reasons, because there was big teams investigating, but there's a huge amount of work went into this from everyone. And I hope that one day all of us can publicly come out and say we were part of the campaign when we're celebrating the death of the industry. So thank you all for being here. I'm just going to see if Becky would like to comment.
Just thanks. Yeah, no, just thanks. Very grateful for you all for watching it. And yeah, there's a lot of issues here. There's workers' issues, which you couldn't get into, migrant workers' issues, environmental issues, community, poverty issues, but again, just for today, we want to keep the animals front and center. Though, as you were saying, you know, compassion, justice, not finite resources. And thank you all for being here. There is a photo call at 12:15 outside. Really appreciate you taking the time. I know it's not a fun way to spend the morning, but there is thankfully some vegan treats from. It's a